Good evening, everyone.
Hello.
It's nice to be on planet Earth, huh? Are you enjoying it?
Seems a little like the hot seat.
It has its challenges, yes. And we've certainly been experiencing that this last month.
But it's more beautiful than ever.
Yes. It's definitely worth the effort. As some of you may know, welcome, Glenn. Jupiter is currently conjunct the galactic center, and Venus will be conjunct the galactic center tomorrow. So with that singular portal, 12-year portal, open tonight and through the weekend, my team just wants me to go big.
Is that every 12 years or 12 years long?
It's every 12 years.
Okay, that's good.
The galactic center, our galactic center, is at 27 degrees of Sagittarius, ruled by Jupiter. And every 12 years, Jupiter's a 12-year cycle. Jupiter, the ruler of the galactic center, combines with the galactic center. We've been experiencing it all year long with Jupiter in Sagittarius, but it's reaching a point of great clarity this weekend. The 9-year process of the Jupiter sojourn, beginning in Aries, a 13-year cycle, reaches a pinnacle of depth and clarity as he approaches the galactic center. The galactic center is a profoundly magnetic, powerful center point that is so profoundly magnetic that it causes an entire galaxy to revolve around it. Jupiter is the path we've been seeking through which to gain deeper perspective and understanding of the central core truth that gives meaning to our lives. So through the last 9 years, we've been exploring various paths through which to gain a deeper understanding of ourselves and the world around us. This 9-year cycle of experience has culminated this year with an opportunity to gain greater clarity of a core principle, the galactic center of our being. That core truth then becomes the driver for great purpose as Jupiter enters Capricorn on December 1st to begin applying that core truth, that core principle, manifesting it in the reality of the civilizational reality around us. So to create context for the present moment, these planets have greater cycles. There's a 500-year cycle of Neptune combining with Pluto, which occurred in the late 1800s, 1892-93, in the sign of Gemini. And Neptune is connected with the imaginal worlds, the heavenly worlds, the dreaming of these greater realities through which we can achieve the highest and most ecstatic form of love in the manifest world. So when Neptune combined with Pluto, setting a new 500-year cycle in motion, a new field of dreaming was introduced to the human race. And through that opportunity now, having gone through over a 100-year period of expanding our understanding of how to manifest heaven on earth, during that time, the East and the West began to shake hands with one another. In 1895, Vivekananda, a great guru from India, visited the United States and began the process of the global expanding awareness of a new field of dreaming to the West. That was quickly followed then in 1920 by Yogananda, who introduced yoga to the West. And shortly after that, inventions made it possible for us, starting with the car, and then the airplane, later then the internet itself, and most recently the cell phone, making it possible for us, Gemini, to become a global civilization and communicate worldwide and begin weaving the dream of unity across the planet of all of humanity. So we've arrived here at this point of our history, where the imaginal worlds are seeking tangible manifestation throughout our civilization to bring our civilization in line with the greater vision of ecstatic relationship one to another. This particular Capricorn climax of 2020 involves the combination of the planets ruling the 8th house Pluto, the 9th house Sagittarius, and the 10th house of Saturn. Saturn's in his own sign, so this process has been building since in the last couple of years when Jupiter entered Scorpio, being in Sagittarius this year in the middle of the Scorpio Capricorn phase of evolution, and now it's getting ready to enter Capricorn itself. So this combination of the 8th, 9th, and 10th house energies is culminating in an opportunity for humanity across the globe to understand how to implement a greater understanding of, in manifest form, of the dreaming that has been going on since the late 1800s as on a civilization-wide level. So this is very, once we have context for the magnitude of the opportunity arising, then we can begin placing ourselves within that particular opportunity and understanding the part we as individuals are playing in doing so. Capricorn itself is connected with the grand accomplishment of our ancestors, of civilization that's been building over thousands of years to its present form. And I have a little news clip for all of you. You are your own ancestors. We've all incarnated a number of times, many of them, unless you're from another world, like maybe Virginia over here. So when we're talking to our ancestors, we may be talking to ourselves. There's a book that Hank Wesselman wrote called Spirit Walker. Have any of you read that book? Yeah. He's actually he's communicating with a future version of himself. A future version of himself can travel back in time to communicate with Hank Wesselman as his ancestor, because the world had gone through such a profound change that they lost much of the technology and wisdom of the former phase of humanity because of the depth of the change that occurred. So he was communicating with Hank across the ethers to pick up some of that ancient knowledge. So we as human beings, in our many varied journeys here on this planet and elsewhere, now are in a position to reap the reward from the consequence of thousands of years of dreaming that particularly was set in motion in the late 1800s. And as Jupiter enters Capricorn with Mars in Scorpio through the end of the year, I've spoken about the density of the mortal matrix. We're entering a period of great density, where the mortal matrix, the tonal of the physical world, begins with death and then begins with birth and ends with death, becomes solidified with great power to grab our attention. So when this occurs, with Neptune in Pisces in her own sign since 2012, contact with the heavenly worlds, with your immortal self, with your essential self, becomes even more pronounced. Because the dominance of the mortal world can easily eclipse and grab your attention in such a way that you lose contact with your immortal soul and become dominated by the challenges of the physical world. Those who have not made contact with their immortal soul can feel like this is a period of the survival of the fittest, where the mortal consciousness is so dense it dominates their entire reality. So how many of you feel that you have been successful in making contact with your immortal soul? There are a few hands raised here. In my last talk, I ended with the phrase that love is its own reward. Now, this is the Neptunian realm of ecstatic consciousness. Once you've made contact with your immortal soul, the power of love pouring out from the source itself becomes a central core of your being, where it becomes a living experience for you, where the power of love itself becomes the central theme of your life. Now, I've had kind of a mystery revealed to me through my own personal initiation this last month. I've always wondered about the transition, because as you move out from the sun, each planet represents a further phase in the evolution of your consciousness. So the further out the planet is from the sun, as a step of evolution, the greater and more profound the experience or transformational influence of that particular field is on your consciousness. So I've traveled all the way out to Neptune, the ecstatic consciousness. You would imagine that all of your personal journeys from day one have had as a primary goal the elevation of your spirit to the state of ecstatic consciousness, Neptune, to bring heaven here on earth, to as a sustained state of love and the experience of love in your daily experience. So once you've achieved that high order of ecstatic consciousness, samadhi, what could possibly follow that? The Neptune to Pluto transition, because Pluto follows Neptune as a natural next step of evolution. So as many of you know, what does Pluto represent? The underworld? Is that right, Glenn? The underworld?
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
So how could
Earth.
After achieving that high ecstatic state, samadhi, how could the underworld possibly be the next natural step? And I've always wondered about that until my personal experience has shown me that. It says, oh, okay, I've achieved a high ecstatic state of love, and then just it flips into the underworld. And I'm saying, whoa, what? This is the Pluto natural next step.
Black hole.
Yeah, how many of you have been profoundly head over heels in love, and then had it switch on you, where your partner starts shadow dancing, and you feel like, whoa, what just happened here? What's the opportunity of that? What's Pluto's opportunity? What's Pluto giving to you at that point as a natural next step? Go ahead.
Making the unconscious conscious.
Yes, but there's a challenge there. Pluto is saying, dive deep into the core of your being and see whether your love is real. If you made contact with the immortal soul, your love is immovable. So the Plutonian realm of the underworld, particularly an intimate relationship, is the arena within which love is perfected. It's tested to its core. you find out how deeply anchored to the immortal soul, yourself, Pluto, the underworld, your being actually is. I mean, you read the stories of some of these really powerful ascended masters or gurus, and it's a story that's like a nightmare. And they called in these really challenging situations to perfect their life and to maintain it through what appeared to be its opposite, to the underworld. So, go ahead.
There's that dance that Neptune and Pluto make too, because Pluto comes inside the orbit of Neptune
Yeah.
for
And
20 years.
Mhm.
250.
Right. And and that was
It's the only ones.
it was in the 80s and 90s, right?
Yes.
Mhm.
79 and 99.
Right. And that accelerated the process of the combination. It's like a Neptune-Pluto conjunction because they were traveling almost like parallel to one another. And then entered sextile phase to one another. That's the long sextile that's approaching in the 20s that will actually be the age of flowering. But back to the personal process, the individual process that we've been experiencing with Mercury retrograde in Scorpio just having gone direct. Whenever you're dealing with Mercury, it becomes a very personal experience, particularly in the way in which you communicate with those who are closest to you. So the opportunities we have now, we've just been through this last month, has been a personal initiation into the right use of power, the right use of the Kundalini, a deeper understanding of how passion and love can combine and not be lost in one another, so that we recognize that each one of us individually, has the power to love regardless of outer circumstance. And it's a very simple truth, but it becomes a living truth in the cauldron of the underworld when you realize that the love that you are always is. And when you know that, you become a light to the world. You become a light in the underworld. Because you become an immovable source of that love to everyone else around you, particularly those who are close to you. We're all human beings here. We shadow dance with one another periodically. We think we see the truth, but we're really projecting our own shadow into the mix as an opportunity for us to dive deeper into the nature of love itself. I'm spending time with this because Neptune is way out here. She's like in her last phase of a 165-year process of exploring the ecstatic state, the imaginal world, the dreaming body, and what we dream our greatest source or experience of ecstatic consciousness may be. We then dream it into being, and then explore it to see whether it actually fits the imaginal world. The reality of our experience actually fits what we've been imagining. And so now with Saturn and Pluto in Capricorn and Jupiter about to enter Capricorn, they are all wandering toward Neptune, toward Pisces themselves to complete their own cycle, but Neptune's already there. But as Jupiter enters Capricorn, Neptune and Pisces is sitting way out here, like almost above the world, the fool on the hill watching the world go around, as the tonal, or civilizational world densifies. So that's why it's even more important to know that you have contact with your own soul through whatever practice you choose, to maintain contact with this Neptunian portal which continues to remain open, so that you can be a bridge to the world for the love that never dies. Are you following me on this? Yeah. So let's take a little closer look. Any questions or comments at this point?
What about Venus?
Venus, I'm glad you asked that. because Venus combining with Jupiter sets a seed tone for the next 12 years. Combining with Jupiter as the beauty way. So this core truth I mentioned, that Jupiter conjunct the galactic center is opening now, with Venus there also. This deep truth, this way that gives meaning to our lives, is combined with Venus, the beauty way. So whatever truth you're embracing is a deeper path to manifest the beauty way in your own life and the lives of others around you as a teaching. Because Sagittarius is the path you follow to expand your understanding and to bring the core initiations of Scorpio into conscious view. So this is a beautiful capstone to prepare us to really apply ourselves, because as Jupiter enters Capricorn, Capricorn is the planet or field of commitment. Commitment to take a stand in the world as a consequence of that deep core understanding of the truth and path that you've been following, to make it real, Capricorn, in the world. This Saturn-Pluto conjunction that's coming up in January, I've just realized today is more significant than I thought. And then with Jupiter also combining with Pluto 3 times, and then Saturn at the end of the year is more significant than I realized. There's a field between Pluto and Neptune, and when Saturn meets Pluto, he crosses Pluto into the field that between Pluto and Neptune, because Pluto's in Capricorn, Neptune's in Pisces, and there's a field between them. So as first Saturn reaches Pluto, he begins to enter the field between Pluto and Neptune. And then Jupiter, going back and forth, finally entering that field also, between Pluto and Neptune. And Jupiter and Saturn entering very close to the same time suggests Saturn and Jupiter are connected with the civilization itself, the civilization we build to make real the dreaming body, the dreaming of the human spirit. So this suggests to me that this is the very beginning, especially over the next 3 years, of a complete and total transformation of society at large globally. And by the time Jupiter reaches Saturn at the end of 2020, 12/21/2020, entering Aquarius, this new field of human societal potential will begin really picking up steam into the 2020s. So this whole field between Pluto and Neptune is an opportunity for transcendent global societal transformation that begins with these conjunctions throughout 2020 and may take until the very end of 2020 to really begin to get our bearings after the elections. And then we'll begin to get the beginning sense of the nature of the awakening that's being presented or offered, not just to us individually, but to the planet as a whole. Just a note on that Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, because they're a 20-year cycle, they do tend to define generations. And this particular 12/21/2020 conjunction is at 0 degrees of Aquarius. Now, 0 degrees of Aquarius is a potent point for the United States of America. Does anyone know why? When is the president inaugurated? January 20th, right? That happens to be 0 degrees of Aquarius. And if a chart was drawn for the inauguration, which would define the presidency of that year, the presidents of the United States for the next 20 years would have 0 degrees Aquarius in their inauguration chart. The sun would be right there on that Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. So this suggests to me that the United States of America is a major player in this age of awakening. Now it's interesting that Barack Obama, regardless of what you think of him, has his Jupiter at where? Glenn? 0 degrees of Aquarius. It's like everything he has done in his life is preparing him to be, he's what is he known as? A community organizer, right? Jupiter and Aquarius. On some level, a big part of this next wave.
His Neptune's on the U.S. moon, too.
Yeah, exactly.
Many of the public just love him. He's
Yeah. He's not done yet.
yeah.
But having said all that, I'm giving great context here because the period of December may be quite challenging, where we can be so overwhelmed by the density of the challenge to our personal sense of being safe, well, and surviving on this planet, that we can easily lose context of the bigger picture of the initiation we're experiencing. Mars has just entered Scorpio, as you know. And right now, Mars, as I've mentioned in other talks, is activating the eagle, the hammer of Thor. Mars opposition Uranus, forming a hammer of Thor with Jupiter, Neptune, and Varuna. This particular eagle formation was activated October 4th, 9th, and then the 27th with the new moon, where we were being challenged to make contact with the starlight within and step forward in the beauty and power of our light and not be swayed by the appearance of things around us in compromising who we are and expressing the essential nature of our being. So Mars is right in that window right now. He's opposing Uranus. Let's see. Yeah, Mars opposes Uranus on Sunday morning. With the Venus-Jupiter conjunction, also Sunday morning. And the moon enters Scorpio Saturday night, tomorrow night at 10 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And then combines with Mars early Sunday morning, and then opposes Uranus also Sunday morning. So what I've been suggesting here with this eagle formation reaches a peak of intensity beginning tomorrow night after 10 p.m. and really reaching maximum intensity on Sunday morning through basically in the dark of the moon until the new moon on Tuesday at 7 in the morning. The moon enters Sag right after midnight on Monday going into Tuesday. So we are entering into the dark of the moon, which is an internally transformative time. And particularly as the moon enters Scorpio, which is a naturally powerful, cathartic, emotional time. The dark of the moon leading up to the new moon Sagittarius is a particularly powerful time to get clear of the depth to which you are connected with your immortal soul versus eclipsed by the shadow dancing of others around you. The moon in Scorpio tends to bring out any shadow elements in your being through which then you project onto others the core fears you may have of losing contact with others. Because as deep as shadow, Scorpio can be the experience of feeling abandoned. And if you are in contact with your immortal soul, you know that you are love. You recognize that opportunity to shed light into the darkness. Because when it appears that no one is returning or reflecting or recognizing you, when you're in contact with your immortal soul, you say, oh, it doesn't matter. I know who I am. Regardless of how it's reflected back to me, particularly in my intimate relationships by others who I care about. So when you reach that depth or level of the foundation of your being, then you recognize it as an opportunity to recommit to the light that you are and shine that light in the darkness. Says, oh, okay. Make it as dark as you want. I'm just going to light this brilliant light inside of me and light it up. And I don't care if anyone or anybody else on this planet loves, I'm going to. And there's a recommitment opportunity there when the darkness intensifies to recommit to the core of your being, which is love itself. And somehow then the darkness just kind of freaks out and says, wow, okay. And you are reconfirmed in the depths to which you've made that commitment to yourself and your path. So that's pretty much the opportunity of particularly Sunday and Monday. And then when the new moon enters Sagittarius, the uplift really begins just before Jupiter enters Capricorn on Monday morning at 10:20 a.m. And then Mercury finally leaves Scorpio on December 9th. Jupiter will have already entered Capricorn by then. So Mercury will be looking then to Jupiter in Capricorn to begin understanding how this greater view of the world, Weltanschauung, can actually begin to be applied in a manifest form, communicating with others with whom we can then work together in a more committed fashion to take our part, Capricorn, as elders, as teachers, as the voice of experience, where we have demonstrate then a particular mastery because of or a result of the experience we've gone through in exploring what is true and what is not. So with Capricorn, we're all being called to duty to take our place as with the particular mastery that we've achieved and make a contribution to those who are younger on the path. It's the father power. That's what fathers do. They take care of and respect and shelter and nurture those who are younger than themselves in a way in which they can gain their own inner certainty and encourage them to stand in their own power as masters of their own reality. So Mars remains in Scorpio through the end of the year, and then he will enter Sagittarius early in January. So the final phase of the Scorpionic initiations will continue to unfold, Mars being the lower octave ruler of Scorpio, and becoming more conscious and aware of the shadow dancing aspects of our being that prevent us from really handling power with integrity. Anyone have Mars and Scorpio in their chart? I know a friend of mine who yes, and she's very psychic. So this can be very connected to, which I've spoken about before. There are adversarial entities who seek to gain access to our psyches when we're on the verge of really awakening to our true power, who will work through our unresolved trauma to turn us against one another. They're not evil or mean, or they don't really hate us. They just use that opportunity to gain power and steal our energy. So I'm very aware of the influence of the dark side. They're not my enemy, they're my brothers lost in the darkness. But I also understand that they have a field day with most humans on this planet, because most humans have no idea about what's influencing them. So they can turn people one against another, because conflict, anger, revenge generates a lot of energy. So when we lose our discipline and we become overwhelmed by darker energies, or emotions especially, they have a field day and feed on that. They don't care what trigger they need to find, they just want a lot of energy. And when we're really pissed off or in fear, what are we doing? We're draining a lot of energy, right? And that's what they feed on. So with Mars and Scorpio, I'm particularly aware of that. We need to be conscious of these astral forces or entities trying to feed on our energy by turning us, particularly in intimate relationships, one on the other. And so whenever I feel that, whenever I sense their presence, I says, I see you. I know exactly what you're doing. I'm not playing that game. I will not allow you to steal my energy or the energy of my loved one. And once they're recognized or busted, they freak out and says, whoa, you busted us. And they go seek out someone else who's an easier target. Anyone know what I'm talking about here? Particularly when you're deeply connected to someone, if they can't get to you directly, what will they do? They'll try to come through the one you love. And because then they have access to you, because you have a bond to them. So this is particularly dramatic throughout December. And Mars in Scorpio is the right use of the Kundalini power, right use of passion. Mars in Scorpio is generally associated with sexuality, but it's not necessarily sexual energy, it's Kundalini energy. So we can get very passionately connected to someone and feel like it's sexual energy, but it's really just passion. And the intensity of the Kundalini rising then is looking for an opportunity to rise to the heart. And if you've done your heart work and your heart is open, which what I've been experiencing, rather than this dramatic activation of the Kundalini, it actually is very gentle, because the heart is open. And when the Kundalini rises to my heart just starts expanding. It's a beautiful, like, blossoming of a lotus. So with Mars in Scorpio, you can have this Kundalini awakening, and for those who have opened their heart or in deep heart compassionate relationship to a loved one, you'll find that the passion arises in you that opens your heart even further. And then once the heart is open, then it can rise even higher into the crown, and it's an active and continuous state of bliss, which is what the whole path of tantric yoga is about. But it's not, that's the Oriental way of doing it, because in the Oriental way, there can be a denial of the lower chakras. But in full-blown activation, all of you is activated, because every part of you is sacred. So through this period of time, watch your heart. And if things intensify or begin to, if you sense there are other forces here attempting to draw you into conflict with others, especially those you love, take a deep breath and say, okay, I'm not playing that game. Because I know who's behind it. You're not even dealing with humans anymore. And once I understood their MO, their mode of operation, then I refused to be drawn onto the battlefield with those I love. It doesn't mean you can't speak your truth and be very clear about who you are, but you're not in contest. You're not battling those you love. You're just holding your ground and loving them. And love cannot be compromised. So this is the little heads up for December, because Mars has already entered Scorpio, so some of you may have been experiencing that already and wondering how you could have been tricked into getting onto the battlefield with somebody you love. Whoa, it's the last thing I ever wanted. But once you understand what's behind it, then you see clearly how it's an opportunity to become more conscious and aware and perfect your discipline. Because when you're on the path of love, bhakti, there's a certain kind of discipline that goes along with it, because you love and you care. And you will naturally hone your being to become conscious of what's not loving. And that's what I call discipline. Particularly for us men here, as warriors of the heart, that discipline becomes very important as a conscious practice. Is that clear? Any questions about that or comments? Well, I've managed to silence the room here. Yeah, and the reason I'm taking some time with the ecstatic portal of Neptune, because Neptune is basically right now at standstill. Neptune will be turning direct on the 27th, right after the new moon. So this heavenly portal is really present with us. We almost feel a tangible presence of a higher order of consciousness, ecstatic consciousness. And I associate the Neptune in Pisces particularly with the angelic realms, those beings who are in closest contact with the source itself, as embodiments or living embodiments of the ecstatic state of the love pouring out from the source. So that's very present with us through this coming week, as an opportunity to go vertical. And if you're feeling like, whoa, this 3D world, the horizontal, is becoming too dense for me, go vertical. And just talk to the angels. Acknowledge them, know they're there. And if you're concerned about your welfare, well-being, or safety or security, the angels are the ones who create miracles. Just talk to them. Say, I feel you, I acknowledge you. I'm asking for a miracle. And you will watch things happen that were so far beyond anything you could have come up on your own. So this has to be angelic, because I never could have imagined this. But that's kind of a gateway that's open through the coming week. Yeah, and Monday, Venus enters Capricorn at 4:29 p.m. in the afternoon, just before the new moon. So that densification process deepens as Venus also enters Capricorn. And then later in December, we start the real turning point of the eclipse on the 25th of December. Solar eclipse at 4 degrees of Capricorn. That's when the real call to duty really begins. Mars will be at the end of its sojourn through Scorpio, so we'll be almost through the scorpionic initiations that clarify what true power is. So as Mars enters Sag in early December, we've been really ready to go to work. Venus enters Aquarius then on the 19th of December, just before the winter solstice on the 21st at 8:20 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. So, any questions or comments at this point? Go ahead.
You mentioned Barack Obama when you did Paris.
Mm-hmm.
What's Trump's role in January? Is he a Canadian?
No, he's Gemini.
Oh, he's Gemini.
Yeah.
Oh.
Mhm.
So what are you saying about him in January?
Well, we have, anyone heard of the Tecumseh curse?
Yeah.
Yeah, the 20-year cycle
Uh-huh. Oh,
of the Tecumseh curse that has been demonstrated throughout the U.S. presidency. Every 20 years, the president will either die or be removed from office.
yeah. And this is it.
Yeah, and it's in alignment with Jupiter-Saturn conjunctions. So every time there's a Jupiter-Saturn conjunction within the current presidential cycle, the Tecumseh curse comes into play. But the Tecumseh curse, because there's a Jupiter-Saturn conjunction on 12/21/2020, and even though the election occurs in November, it's still within the presidency of Donald Trump, because the new president won't be inaugurated until January 20th, technically. And this actually occurred with Bill Clinton, and he was impeached. But since Ronald Reagan, the Jupiter-Saturn conjunctions have changed element, or begun to change element. They were in the Earth signs for 200 years before that. And the first of the air sign conjunctions occurred during the Reagan administration, so we all wondered whether he would actually be assassinated, or whether, because the element changed to air, whether he would survive. And he did. He was shot but survived. And Gemini being an air sign, it was about his mentality, whether he had Alzheimer's or whether he was losing it, basically, mentally.
So the curse applies to
But-
whoever wins the election? And it's inaugurated in January 2021?
Well, because they're not inaugurated until January 20th, it wouldn't apply if, in fact, another president, is not elected, aside from Trump. It wouldn't apply to him.
Oh.
So it's so since and then it switched back one more time to an Earth sign with George Bush and Jr. And the election was basically stolen, but he didn't. He survived, and so it seemed like the Tecumseh curse had been lifted. So this next conjunction is the first of a 200-year phase of Jupiter-Saturn conjunctions in the air signs. The air signs being the signs of consciousness, which is, so that to me pegs the new age of awakening for the next 200 years. So whoever is elected would be the beginning of that particular opportunity for Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, society-wide. It's not just the United States, but across the planet. The real age of awakening beginning to show itself, which will really then take off by the mid-20s. So there are signs that possibly Trump could win the nomination if something happened to him before he's actually inaugurated.
Can you say that again?
There are signs that Trump may actually win the election, but something may happen to him between November and January 20th where he doesn't actually
With this one?
take office.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. But this whole impeachment thing is, very similar to the Tecumseh curse. It got Clinton in trouble and all that stuff too. So. Do you have any insight on that, Glenn? On whether Trump's going to win or not?
Oh, a study group, we looked at him, and,
Yeah.
he's got his Saturn, Pluto down at the end of his fourth and his fifth house, and that's his children.
Yeah.
The Ivanka, the ex-wives and stuff.
Yeah.
I think somehow they're gonna be involved in
Mhm.
coming down. He's got some decent things, he looks
Yeah.
good, but it just doesn't fit.
Well, you know, this whole Capricorn climax, Saturn, Jupiter, Pluto conjunctions, they're all occurring in his fifth house,
Right.
which is his eldest son. So I'm looking at Donald Trump Jr. right now.
Well, he's a
Take,
Venus Saturn.
passing the mantle to Donald Trump Jr., which is a lot, well, there's a lot of talk now about Donald Trump Jr. taking over from Trump. So that's kind of what I'm looking at with that in his chart, you know. and, but there's a lot to be decided between now and then, in terms of who actually takes the hot seat. Go ahead.
I was just asking, you were talking about Barack Obama earlier.
Mhm.
His Aquarius was his Neptune was in the United States moon,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right.
So, do either one of you guys have any idea? So you still think he has a role to play in the future? Any idea what role that may be?
Community organizer. Yeah, that's
In
it.
what sense, like chairman of the DNC, something like that?
I'm not sure it's even going to be political.
I
I-
was calling him the Ayatollah of America.
Yeah.
He's a spiritual head,
Yeah.
not a political head.
Yeah. The Aquarius would be to promote especially younger people and help them organize their communities and become not the head like he was as president, I think, but really active in organizing the next wave of
Almost bringing
enlightenment.
on a new societal change then, a new way
Yeah,
of looking at things.
right.
possibly.
And he just has all these connections and ways of bringing people together to set a new wave of awakening into motion. So I don't think it's going to be political. I think he's done with that. But he's definitely not done being a major player in the awakening phase of the United States of America. Would you say that's true about him?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would. Neptune on the moon, that's
Right.
just waves and waves.
Mhm. Right.
The presidency was one wave. There are other
Right,
ones to come.
exactly. It's like, similar to Jimmy Carter. His most important work was after he became president. But having become president gave him access that he would not have ordinarily had to make a difference. Go ahead.
Oh, she has a question.
Depending on where your Mars is at,
Mhm.
where is Mars and whatever, what difference would that make?
They're trying to answer your question.
Depending
They're trying to answer your question. Pick it up.
So, like depending on what your particular Mars is in, how would that affect?
Watch the men who show up in your life.
Because that's how they operate.
Your Mars would tend to manifest through the men who show up in your life.
But each person individually, like where my Mars is at, depending on where somebody else's is at, with the Mars in Scorpio, would it make any difference?
You would be more in terms of the center of the storm if your Mars is being activated. If your Mars is not activated, you may watch others who are in the center of the storm and be able to give them perspective and help them walk through it without losing their center. Yeah. Anyone else? So if we're all enlightened, we'll just call it a night. Thank you, brothers and sisters.